We have a number of things to cover today. First, last week I made this card for my mother-in-law, and I sent it off to Scotland with a promise to let you know if it arrived on time, in good condition, and if she liked it. She told us that she's been showing it to everyone, and I feel really good about making such a special card for her. Next, as I was making that card, the concept of unlimesable came to me, meaning that despite my telling you all the time to use what's in your stash, I was showing you something that might not be easy to get the look of. So in last week's video, I also made a similar looking card using a Z fold to get that opening action to give you some ideas. But let's go back and talk about whether there are times when you really can't get the look with what you've got. And what do you do when that happens? Let's start with a couple of my recent purchases. The first one is this Christmas stamp set. I love this angel. She has such a delicate look, and you'll remember I really bought the set just for her, although there are other elements in the set that I like just fine. I talked more about her and my reasons for buying this set in this video here. I do not recall thinking before I added to cart, do I have something in my stash already that I can use to get a similar look? And that was partly because I just love her so much. But also, an angel is not something I have a lot of. I do have a couple. Some are solid, some are more elegant and serious looking, but I really love the joy this one seems to have. I also use angels quite a bit when I'm making my Christmas cards, so I'm very comfortable with my choice to buy this one to add to my collection. The next purchase I made was this layering stencil set. I love circles, and I love designing with circles. I already have a ton of circle and dot stencils and dies and stamps, and this time I did really put my limes cap on before I added this to my cart. Because how hard can it be to get such a simple look, right? Let's talk about that while I do kind of a medium level dive with this set and make a couple of cards. Here's the color combination I'm using. In the end, I didn't use those two blues down on the bottom actually. So Coral Cabana, Catching Rays, Tiki Torch, Lime Ricky, and Aquatini, all from Catherine Pooler. Each of these three stencils has two kind of partial target cutouts on two sides of the stencil. And they're positioned so that when you stack all three together, you get a really nice, balanced, overlapping design. I'm starting by just layering the stencils up the way they were meant, and there's etching on the bottom of each so I can tell how to line them up properly. But of course, you could use each stencil separately, you could flip them, you can shift them along, you can use each partial target on its own to create many, many different and unique patterns. To create a similar look without the stencils, you could of course use nesting dies and cut masks to mimic the look. You might already have a rainbow stencil that you could use to create a similar look as well. My thinking was that cutting masks would be fiddly, trying to get them even and lined up perfectly, and they'd also be very temporary. Now that doesn't have to be a bad thing. If you need this look for one specific card you're trying to make and you've got time and good die cutting skills, that can definitely work. When I check my electronic inventory for rainbow supplies, I do have these three stencils that I probably could have used to get a somewhat similar look, but the precise geometry of these circles really appeals to me. And for $14.99, it seemed cost effective. Another feature is that these stencils are pretty forgiving. Because I'm using a grip mat, I didn't necessarily get the three stencils lined up as perfectly as I would have if I had used something with a corner, like my Misty or my Waffle Flower stencil mat. And it still looks very pretty. I used a 5¼ inch square piece of cardstock, and that gives me some leeway in choosing the area I want to cut for my focal panel. I'm making a square card as usual, but there's plenty here for an A2 card or even a panel for a 5½ inch square or a 6-inch square card if you added some mats. Next, I became the queen of indecision for a while, which to be honest is not like me. I wanted to add some lime green and aquatini to the card, but I wasn't sure how to best do that with the die cut sentiment I had selected. I like to keep extra die cuts on hand, and that allowed me to add ink in different colors to the shadows and to the words, and once they were all dry, I was able to play around a bit and decide that I really didn't want any of those. No worries, I put them all back in my pocket and I can use them another time. And I settled on a blended shadow with the lime and the aqua, along with the white die cut sentiment. Now I'm going to hold off showing you the card for a second because finishing the next card actually inspired me to do some more to this one. This time I'm going to use one of the perfect half targets. There's actually two in this set and they're called rainbows. One is about 4 inches across, and the other one is just over 4¼ inches across. And they can be used to create a simple rainbow on your card if that's what you're going for. I filled in the first half of my target with my 3 warm colors, making sure I had that edge masked off so I wouldn't get color where I didn't want it. Then I moved this stencil and I tried to line it up as well as I could to create full circles. I blended more ink through to create these concentric circles of blended color. I really liked it, but I wasn't really sure where to go with it until I remembered that I have another Kristina stencil set, the Geomod stencil that layers up to create a really fun-looking modern pattern, but it's made up of a whole bunch of individual elements, like this big arrow. I don't know why, but I loved how that arrow looked, and I just built from there. I moved this stencil and I masked when I needed to. That smaller arrow was a little too long for where I wanted to put it. I used the lime and the aqua for these elements, and the translucency of these inks gives a layered look, which is really interesting, but the card is also totally flat. I hadn't really thought through what my sentiment was going to be for this one, but I knew I needed something pretty bold. So I grabbed an old Avery Elle Happy Birthday and I inked it up with black. This has a fun graphic feel, and I love those dots. They act a bit like embellishments, but they also somehow add movement and happiness to the card. So I went back and added a few of them to the first card as well. I'm really happy with both of these cards, but I know there's a lot more potential, especially when you start combining those circles with other stencils. We've looked at specific products today, but a couple of your comments last week got me thinking about unlimesable in a completely different way. Are there cards that are unlimesable? I wonder if you'd like to join me in this by posting a photo of a card you think is unlimesable in an album on my Facebook page. Post your photo before April 19th, and then in my video on the 25th, I'll choose one and I'll show you how I would apply limes to it. If you don't think it's a good idea, that's okay too. I'll know if there's no photos and I'll come up with something else. In the meantime, I'd love to hear your biggest challenges when it comes to using an inspiration. I think there's probably just as much to say about unlimes as there is about limes, so maybe it's time we start talking about it more. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.